What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Nick with Leverage Media, and welcome to another episode of Path to a Million podcast. Wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of developments in the PPP program, some of which you have probably heard about. What we're going to talk about here today passed on Friday, and but there's a couple of other things that are in the works that I think have a pretty good chance of working its way through Congress. Whether it ends up being exactly the same way as what they're looking at right now, yet to be determined. So first, let's talk about I believe it's called the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. So this is the bill that passed through the House last week, passed the Senate like the next day, and then the president signed it on Friday. This is an important one, especially for chiropractors, because it got extended to 24 weeks. So most of us, I would imagine that most people are similar to my practice in that payroll is by far the biggest burden through the COVID crisis. There's some carve outs for, like rent and utilities and things like that, but those are way more important to me than the payroll side of it. So what this did is it extended the time that you have to spend the money from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, or it says 12/31, whichever one comes sooner. But I would imagine anybody who is listening to this has already gotten their PPP loan, and so they're probably at some stage in the process. So my 8 weeks ended on Thursday of last week. And I think this thing got passed on Friday, so it was kind of just in the nick of time. This allows me to extend it longer. There's probably maybe another payroll's worth of money that hasn't been spent yet. So the nice part about this is that now you get to kind of decide how you want to use the money. So before, when we only had 8 weeks, I was trying to figure out how to maximize the money as much as possible. So I was going to use it for the interest on my mortgage. I was going to use it for the utilities. I was going to use it for all the extra stuff because we weren't going to have enough time to use it all for payroll. Well, now that we have 24 weeks, I'm going to use it 100% for payroll. That way I hit all the requirements for getting it relieved or forgiven. But if you want, the other big change in here was that the percentage changed from 75% needed to be spent on payroll to get full forgiveness, and it moved to 60%. So what these two changes really mean and I'll go over let me go over the other changes real quick before I go into kind of the strategy of it. So the other thing is that originally you were going to have to get back to your pre-COVID employment levels and payroll levels by June 30th. You now have until 12/31. You also, the repayment, let me just make sure that I've got this part correct. So they extended the deferral of the loan payment. So now, I just want to read this. Extends deferment of payment of loan principal, interest, and fees from the current 6 months. So originally it was you wouldn't have to pay anything, any interest or anything for 6 months. This now goes to the date when the SBA pays the forgiveness amount to your lender. If a borrower has not applied for forgiveness of a covered loan within 10 months after the last day of the covered period, payments on principal, interest, and fees will begin. So basically, if you have not applied, if a borrower has not, so if your covered period, say your covered period goes for the full 24 weeks, you would then have 10 months to apply for forgiveness after that date. But basically, this extends the deferment of any type of payments until the SBA has decided, or I'm sorry, the lender has decided on or I guess the SBA has decided on what level of forgiveness that you get. So as long as you get 100% forgiveness, I believe that takes care of all the interest as well. So you wouldn't have any payments. If for some reason you don't apply for forgiveness, you would have 10 months after the last day of your covered period before that all starts. Another thing is that the employer payroll taxes that are incurred on this, so they get deferred. They can be deferred up to 2 years. So what it means is so if you have your the gross payroll is what is covered by the PPP loan, and that's what you can get forgiven for. But the employer tax is on top of that. So like the 8-9%, whatever it is that you pay on top of that, that is not covered in the forgiveness. So if you've kept your employees and you have to pay that employer tax piece of it, you don't have to pay it right away. You have to pay it regardless, but you don't have to pay it right away. You can you have to pay at least 50% of it in 2021, and then you have to pay the remaining 50% of it in 2022, or you can just pay it as you go. But if you needed to defer it, then you could. Let's see. I think that's the main thing. So the big ones are 24 weeks that you have to use the money. And if you use the money in like 13 weeks, then it's 13 weeks. But you have 24 weeks to use it. You only have to use 60% of it on payroll, and you're allowed to wait until December 31st to get back to your pre-COVID levels. Now, the thing that I thought was really helpful was that the Act also created a new full-time equivalent reduction exemption that provides loan forgiveness. Loan forgiveness will not be impacted if the full-time equivalent reduction was due to being unable to rehire employees or hire similarly qualified employees or return to pre-COVID-19 business activity. So the pre-COVID-19 business activity, I think, is the new part of this. In that, in the forgiveness application, it said, if somebody refused to come back to work, it wasn't going to be held against you. If you made them a good faith offer in writing and they rejected it in writing, then you'd be able to show this. But this actually makes it much more flexible to where, you could really pretty much make up. I think that they'll be super lenient when it comes to giving you exemptions for not getting back to your full staffing, especially if your collections are down. You'd be able to, or like if your visits are down, like for me, for example, I've got massage therapy. If for whatever reason, like we tried to open up massage, they didn't want to do it. Like people just didn't want to come in. We weren't able to make it profitable, and we had to get rid of massage. I don't think that the massage would be like not having the massage therapist come December 31st. I don't think that would count against us. One of my massage therapists is going to be leaving in the summertime. If I'm not able to find somebody who's a licensed massage therapist, that also would not count against me. Those are tough to find sometimes. So I have no idea if it's going to be more difficult in COVID times. So they're going to be very lenient. That kind of leads me to some rumblings that I've heard about some new things that might be coming down the pike. One of which is that there is a push right now to allow for anybody who got less than, I think it was 150,000 was the last that I heard, but that could go up at some point. But anybody who got less than 150,000, which I would imagine is probably 97% of chiropractors, would automatically get forgiven, doesn't matter what you get. And I have a feeling that that's going to gain steam, and that by the time it comes to apply for forgiveness for most of us, that they will have something like that in place to where you'll probably have to fill out, a piece of paper saying like, I used it to keep employees, and that's going to be kind of the gist of it. So I have a feeling that that's coming. There was another bill that got proposed today. 3 Democratic senators proposed this, and I saw a couple of comments from some Republican senators that said that they would support this, and I don't know why they wouldn't support this. But it is called Jeanne Shaheen, Ben Cardin, and Chris Coons. What do they call this? They called it it's going to be called the Prioritized Paycheck Protection Program, otherwise known as the P4 Act. So the letter P and then the number 4. So you could probably Google P4 Act. It just happened this morning. So it's a new thing. They're going to have to, I would imagine they'd have to get some Republican sponsors on this, and then they would get it in front of the Senate, but I would guess that this would have a good chance of going through. So the bill authorizes new lending under the PPP program to small businesses with 100 employees or less, including sole proprietorships and self-employed individuals. Eligible businesses must have already extended, or I'm sorry, I thought this sentence was going to say it, but basically it says that this is going to allow people to get a second PPP loan. So you would have to have less than 100 employees. Eligible businesses must have already expended an initial PPP loan or be on pace to exhaust the funding, which I would imagine is most of us, and must demonstrate a revenue loss of 50% or more due to the COVID pandemic. That's the part where I'm like, not everybody is gonna qualify for this. But for example, my office had to close for a month, so that month was pretty desolate. So they have a one sheet on this. Actually, let me read the rest of this first too. Let's see. So publicly traded companies are ineligible. It caps out at $2 million. So if there's it says hospitality and lodging businesses like hotels with multiple locations are limited to an aggregate loan amount of $2 million. It would reserve the lesser of $25 billion or 20% of the PPP funds for employers with 10 or fewer employees, which I would imagine is the majority of chiropractors, as well as small businesses in underserved or rural communities. So that way we wouldn't get stuck out in the cold like we did last time, or a lot of us did in the first round of PPP money. The bill also directs SBA to issue guidance to give priority to business with 10 employees or fewer in the processing and disbursement of P4 loans. So what this would do, it would provide eligible small businesses with as much as 250% of monthly payroll costs. So again, 2.5 times what your monthly payroll costs are. It would prevent affiliated businesses with separate locations from receiving more than $2 million in aggregate loans. And it would allow P4 recipients to apply for forgiveness of their loans 8 weeks after the loans have been dispersed, if you needed to do it that quickly instead of having to wait the 24 weeks. So they put out a little one sheet on this, and the part that I thought was important was that it says these are for borrowers that are self-employed or have 100 or fewer employees that have demonstrated a revenue loss of 50% or more due to the pandemic compared to a relevant period. So this is the part that I think would be kind of important, because I was looking at my numbers today, and if I take where my so we closed on March 23rd. That was the first day that we were not seeing patients. So that week we went down to I don't know, a couple $1,000s in collections. And from that point to this point, like today, June 10th, and I would imagine it's going to be a 90-day period. If I don't collect, I think it was if I don't collect $25,000 more dollars between now and I think it's the 23rd. Yeah. So in the next 2 weeks, if I don't collect $25,000, then I should be able to show that I collected 50% less than I did for the same time period of 2019. So if they let you pick the time period that you can show the 50% loss, and usually they tend to work in 90-day chunks. If you can show that you collected 50% less than you did in 2019, or potentially a relevant period, you may be able to choose right before COVID started, which in this bill, or in the PPP bill they use is February 15th. So it kind of depends on what the devil will be in the details on that one. But this has got a real potential. I mean, for my office in particular, I got a little bit over $100,000 for the first round. This is saying, and now it says maybe as large as 2.5 times monthly payroll costs, just as under initial PPP loans. So there may be some rules around it, if you were only down this much, you only get this much. They haven't fleshed out all the details yet. This is just kind of a proposal, but I do like the chances of this happening, I think, are pretty good. They had Mnuchin and the SBA commissioner in front of Congress today, and I can't. I was reading Twitter about it, but I don't know if they actually ended up asking them about this in particular. But this was put forward today, I would imagine, because of the testimony that was happening today. I think it was in front of the Senate. Yeah. So anyway, we'll see what they say on that. But I really like the chances of the smaller loans just getting automatically forgiven. And I also like this. Hopefully, this will be a thing where we'll be able to get a second round of PPP money. So, so that's all the updates that I have for you guys on. One last thing is when they changed the 60 from the 75 to 60% on payroll, they originally they had thought that was a cliff. Like if you did not hit the 60% on payroll, that you would get zero forgiveness. But the SBA came out and issued a statement saying that is not the case. You'll still be able to get incremental forgiveness if you do 55% on payroll. Oh, you know what? I forgot to do this. The last thing I'll say about this is the strategy on how to maximize this for yourself. The fact that they're extending it 24 weeks and the fact that you get until December 31st to bring your full team back, and the fact that you have a lot of new rules that would allow you to get the forgiveness, like if your business wasn't where it was pre-COVID, if you weren't able to rehire the people. There's been so many different individual situations that have happened since this first thing passed that I think they realize they're not going to be able to adjudicate every single situation. So what I would recommend for people, because I get a lot of people asking me about specific situations of should I keep paying people 100%? What I would say is, now that we have this extension, when we only had the 8 weeks, it was you had 8 weeks to spend it. And most of us were not going to be able to spend it anyway if we didn't give it to our staff at 100% pay. Now that it's been extended 24 weeks, I think those offices that are not at full capacity and are potentially paying people to sit at home, those I know in New York, I was just talking to a client, they're still on where they're only allowed to see emergency cases. They're not allowed to see wellness cases at all. So if it were me, I'm in a little bit of a different situation because we have everybody back and we're not full capacity, but we are busy enough to where we need everybody that is on the payroll. If I had people still sitting at home though, I would probably elect to lay those people off or start paying people for, if I had people coming in half the time that they were used to, I would start paying people based off of what they're actually doing. And I would only be using any of this PPP money towards the people that are actually coming into work, because now this will allow you to extend out that payroll on that initial PPP money as long as you can. And hopefully the second round will come through. That'll allow you to extend it even more. I don't know how that's going to affect things, if it's going to be you only have the 24 weeks to spend both, if they end up doing a second round or not, or if it would extend it further beyond that. So the fact that you have until December 31st to get back to full employment. So if you did have to lay anybody off, if you did have to start paying people 50%, you would, as long as you got back to your full amount, or you were able to show that you couldn't bring them back for whatever reason, like they didn't want to come back, or they took another job, or because in the forgiveness application, there's all kinds of things that allow you to not count that person against your full-time equivalent. So this 24 weeks really changes everything. Had I known this from the very beginning, if they'd have done it for 24 weeks from the get-go, if you were closed, there would have been no point in paying people. You could put them on unemployment. They could have made what they were making, if not more, and then you could have brought them back once you open back up, and you wouldn't have wasted that PPP money to have people just sitting at home. When you only had 8 weeks to spend it, it didn't make any sense not to spend the money on the payroll, because you had to hit those percentages and you had to actually use the money. So this 24 weeks really changes stuff. You've got to look at your individual situation, but you have a lot more flexibility now when it comes to. I think we're at a point now where if you're not back full time, if people aren't actually working, then it doesn't make sense to use this money if you're not getting anything in return for the payroll, then I think it would make sense to lay them off, allow them to collect unemployment. I think that runs until the end of July. So then the extra $600 a week runs through the end of July. So that would give you some, they would still be able to make the money that they needed. You'd be able to bring them back when you needed to. The 600 is not going to get extended, I would imagine. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here to really maximize this money, and then hopefully there'll be a second round as well. All right, guys. Well, I don't see any comments, so I will talk to you guys soon, and I'll probably make another video just specifically about that second round with some of the details in case somebody doesn't listen all the way through. So hope you guys have a good one.